to the beat. When you see me come and make some room. Everywhere I go, I'm in the spotlight.
The next outdoor excursion of Fantastic Caverns is now underway.
Alright, so it is hot, so we're going to make this brief. But our first stop is right outside the cave. This here is the steam-powered engine we used to bring lights in our cave for the first time back in 1887. Our cave was the first electronically lit cave on this side of the Mississippi. The first was in Tennessee, and they only beat us by about 2 weeks. I'm going to say that one more time. They only beat us by about 2 weeks. We were the number 2. And our cave, excuse me, our cave and visitor center had electricity before the city of Springfield, St. Louis, or Kansas City. So at the time, a lot of people would come to our cave and camp out for days. Not to see the beautiful cave, but to see the magic light bulbs that were a brand new invention at the time. Now this doesn't work to power our cave anymore. The only thing that still works, the most important part, is the whistle. Welcome inside of Fantastic Caverns. This is one of only 4 drive-through caves in the entire world and the only one in North America, so you guys are in for a very unique experience today. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about light zones. This will give us context later on in the tour. Any cave system you enter into will have these same 3 separate and distinct zones that have to do with the natural sunlight on the outside of the cave coming in. Now where we came in at and where the natural sunlight comes in at is called the entry zone or the light zone. Where we are now is called the twilight zone. Anybody? Nothing spooky is going to happen here. This is just where the light and the dark meet. This is also how foreign animals who live on the outside of our cave would come in for food or shelter from a storm. They're not going to go any farther this direction because they're not going to be able to see any of the resources. And in front of us, believe it or not, is called the dark zone. Does anybody know why it's called the dark zone? Because it's dark, absolutely. This is one of only 2 places on planet Earth where you can see true and natural darkness, and we'll talk more about that later on. These are baby cave formations called soda straws. They're called that because they're thin-walled and hollow just like a straw is, and they are created when rain and runoff water from the surface comes down through the soil and the rocks. Now as the water makes its way down, it's going to pick up trace amounts of calcite and other minerals. And once it reaches the air pocket of the cave here, the minerals are going to be left stuck on the ceiling and the water is going to drip through the hollow centers. Now these will get 6 to 8 inches long before they fill in their hollow center, and then the water will start to travel around the outside, which is what creates larger stalactites. Now we are going to see a lot of beautiful cave today. Are you ready to go explore in the dark zone? Yeah. So welcome inside of the auditorium. This is the biggest, most wide open space here inside our cave. And to give you some reference to the surface, we're right beneath where your cars are parked out in the parking lot. So try not to think about that when you're leaving today. Now if you look up on the ceiling with me, right about here is how long those soda straws are going to get before they fill in their hollow centers. And once they do, they're going to start looking more like the carrot-like formations on the ceiling. Any of the formations coming down from the ceiling are classified as stalactites. But not all stalactites are the same. These right here are a special kind of stalactite called cave curtains or cave draperies. And instead of the water coming straight down through the pore of the rock, the water's going to come down on an incline. Similar to when you're in the shower and you reach for something and the water follows your arm down. Does the same thing on the slanted ceiling, which is what creates those thin shapes that you see. Now this averages about 3 drips per second in wet season, and it's dripping on our stalagmite. And remember the difference, 5 stalactites hold tight to the ceiling, while stalagmites, you might trip over them if you're clumsy like me. Now also, if they work really, really hard, they might one day grow up and meet their cave buddy on top and become a cave pillar or cave column. Now, we did see a couple of these on the way in, and we'll see a few more, but these two are going to take a really long time to get there. Our average growth rate inside our cave system for our active formations, that means a formation that stays wet 100% of the time, is 1 cubic inch for every 100 years. So what that means is if you guys came back 100 years from today, first of all, congratulations, I'll see you there. Second, this stalagmite here would only look like we added one single fresh coat of paint. That would be it after 100 years. So by the time that this stalagmite meets this stalactite into a cave column or cave pillar, you and I would be something called dead. Take a long time. Now what else took a very long time was the carving out of our cave system. All of the open space here inside our cave was naturally carved out by an underground river. Now this is a limestone cave. Limestone's a very porous rock, meaning it has a lot of holes, and when rushing water goes through it, it is more easily eroded or dissolved away. So that river came through here, taking pieces of limestone with it, and that's what carved out all of the open space inside our cave. Now this river is still active, it's just active on the lower level of Fantastic Caverns, and we will have the opportunity to see that later on in the tour. Now we say all of this to say, we have absolutely no idea how old this cave system truly is. There's too many variables involved with trying to figure that out. But you can imagine, one single coat of paint every 100 years, this would take a very long time, let alone the carving out of our cave itself. But there is one formation here in the 4-mile cave system we do know how old it is, and at our next stop I'm going to show you that. But before you... Alright, so Fantastic Caverns has a lot of beautiful and natural formations. Does anybody see a formation that doesn't look very natural? Oh, look at that! You guys found it! Well, this formation right here we like to call a mistake. So to give you some reference to where we are, we have crossed the street you guys drove in on, and we are in the hillside across from the parking lot, but we are 91 feet below the surface already. Now this here is a well casing. Back in 1941, the landowner across the street wanted to build a house and he needed running water. Knowing that his property was over the cave, him and the current owner at the time put their heads together, and after several days of hard work, they had determined if they drilled in this spot here, this pole would end up 10 feet on the other side of that wall. They missed. They came down here though, saw the pole was out of the way, and instead of leaving a 91-foot hole in the ceiling, they went ahead and just left it, and they continued to drill into the lower level of Fantastic Caverns another 50 or 60 feet below. Now this well is capped off, it's no longer in use, but we did learn some things about our cave, so we're really glad they made this mistake. Now when it was first put in, it was cast iron black, but the same mineral water that creates our formations comes in from the top hole, and has coated this pole with calcite and other minerals, making it look like a cave formation itself. You can kind of see where that one coat of paint every 100 years comes in from. Also, if you look on the ceiling behind the pole and down the wall, you will see little white ribbons. These little white ribbons are baby cave curtains, just like the cave curtains we saw in the middle at our last stop. Now these have been growing for 80 years, and in their biggest place, they are 3/4 of an inch, which is where we got our average growth rate of 1 cubic inch every 100 years from. Now this is something we didn't know before. The only other way to find this out is by cutting into and destroying formations, and it's more of an estimate rather than a direct number. But here at the cave, we do not believe in destroying it to get answers. So instead we tell you it's super, super old, and we hope you're good with that. You can see true and natural darkness. One is at the bottom of the ocean, which I would not suggest. And the other is in the dark side of the cave where we are now, so we're going to take this up. On the way, we're going to drive by an underground sinkhole that we refer to as a drainage point here in the subsurface. This right down here is a direct look into the lower level of Fantastic Caverns where that lower river system now resides. Now it is dry season right now, so you will not see water at this particular part of the cave, but there are permanent pools of water on the lower level that stay all year round. Now when the water comes in, it comes from a recharge area about 3 miles away by Springfield Missouri Airport. Rain and runoff water will collect in a couple sinkholes throughout the area, collect them there, come to our cave system here, and come to our cave and leave at Indian Point Springs and the Little Sac River. Now the last reason we stay up here is because in those permanent pools of water down there live a couple of endangered species that we need to protect. The Ozarks cave fish, the Ozarks cave crayfish, and the Ozarks cave salamander. Now all of these animals are born a white or opaque color, and they are born blind or will be blind within the first few weeks of life. This has to do with the natural darkness that we saw earlier. They live their whole lives in that darkness, and they will never leave the cave, so skin pigmentation and eyesight are not necessary, and they rely on the water to bring them in food like plants and insects. Discovered this cave back in 1862. Does anybody know what else was going on here in America in 1862? Civil War, yes. And during the Civil War, Missouri was a hot topic for debate. It did not belong to the North, it did not belong to the South, and everybody wanted it. And part of the reason that everybody wanted it is because Missouri is sometimes referred to as the cave state because of how many cave systems we have here. We now know there are over 7,000 cave systems in the state of Missouri and 400 in Greene County alone. And a lot of these caves were being discovered at this time, and that is partially responsible to Missouri being under martial law. And all that means, in short, is that if you had something, whether that be your land, crops, cattle, or your cave system, either side of the war could come in and they could take it from you, and there was nothing you could do about it. There was no guarantee that they would A, reimburse you for it, or B, give it back when they were done. They could leave you with nothing. John knew this, knew they were looking for cave systems, so he decided to cover the hole and keep it a secret for those 5 years. Now, why were they looking for cave systems? The main reason was for an element called saltpeter. Saltpeter is found in cave systems with a large bat population because it is produced with bat guano, which is bat poop, by the way. But our 25 thumb-sized bats do not produce enough bat guano to produce that saltpeter element. But if they did and you added a little potash and a little sulfur, does anybody know what you get?
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder, yes. Gunpowder, last I checked, a hot commodity during war times. So we are really grateful to John and Juno for keeping their mouths shut, because if they didn't, somebody could have came in here and mined this cave to death for an element we don't even have in the first place. So by doing this, John Knox actually saved the cave system. So we're really glad they kept it a secret. But what the 12 young ladies that first came into our cave did not have the same modern conveniences that we currently do when it comes to bringing light into somewhere dark. So they had to be a little more creative, and they would have used something like this. All this is a candlestick and a can with a handle on it. Prevents the drips from taking out your light, prevents your hand from getting burned, and it actually works pretty well as a spotlight. Now, believe it or not, this is also the first example of an incandescent light. Some ladies never got to see the cave the way we get to see it today. Second to the cave is called the Hall of Giants. would not have been a guide at the time.